It's Monday. Let's talk about control. Have you ever heard of the sphere of influence and the circle of control? Probably, because I didn't invent it. It's not all that new. But you know what? Every single school year, I find myself having to think about this again and remind myself about the importance of this every single year. And essentially how it works is pretty simple. You have a circle in the middle, which is your circle of control. That is something that you can actually change. You're in control of that. Then you have the sphere of influence around it, and the sphere of influence are things that you can potentially control in some sort of way through influencing, right? You can influence the outcomes, but you aren't in complete control of them. And then outside of that are things that are outside of your control. And common sense says, don't pay any attention to the stuff that's outside of your control. Don't spend your energy and your emotional energy, especially your creative energy, working on things that are outside of your control, or worrying, more importantly, about things that are outside of your control, because you should be focusing on things you can control or things that at least you can influence, right? Now, that's not new to me, but it seems like every single year, at least 2 or 3 times a year, I have to look at that chart and remind myself, what is in my control? What am I worrying about? And is this something I can even influence? Because often it doesn't. Let's give some examples. Politics. Right now, I feel like politics are driving me crazy. Not just because it's an election year, but because there's so much going on that's super polarizing, and I have friends on both sides of the fence, and it drives me crazy. And so I have to remind myself that politics are outside of my control. And the way that major media sources say things, that's outside of my control. And if they spin stuff, they spin stuff. I can't influence that. I'm not a member of the media. I have no influence in that area. Other things that are outside of our control, like weather. Here in Colorado, we just had a couple weeks worth of really bad fires. I know in California they're still going on, and that's another thing that's, for most of us, it's outside of our control. It's even outside of our ability to influence, and that's discouraging. It's difficult, but it's the truth. And if we worry about all the things that are outside of our control and outside of our influence, we won't have time to focus on the things that we are in control of and do have influence over. So how does this translate to the classroom? That's kind of the question that I feel like I've been asking myself this morning as I was driving into work. How does the circle of control and the sphere of influence, how does that affect me in my classroom? What are the things during a school day, for example, that I am in control of, I have an influence over, or I have no influence over, or no control over? What are those things? And as I have been thinking about that, I've got a few examples. Things that I can worry about sometimes that I don't need to worry about because they're outside of my control and outside of my influence. I made a list. Student home life. With online learning especially, the student home life is even more of an impact, I think, in what's going on in our learning environments and our online learning than normal, because they're in their home and they're stuck in their home. So if they have a tough home life or they're facing difficult home challenges, they don't get to get away from that during the school day. There's no reprieve. So that's tough, and that's outside of our control, outside of our influence. It's certainly something we want to empathize with, but not something that we should spend our energy worrying about because it's so little a part of what we can do from our end. Another thing that we're not in control of, students eating breakfast. You know, there's that. There's a wonderful thing about students being able to come to school and eat breakfast at the beginning of the day and start off the day getting calories, getting their blood flowing, getting energy, recouping energy rather in the morning and getting prepared for learning. And we know test scores are improved when students eat breakfast. So it's actually something that's important beyond just the actual basic needs met, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need to feel safe, you need to feel secure, right? We got to make sure that our students can feel that way, and we don't have control over that. That's hard, you know? We can encourage, we can call home, we can maybe try and present some other solutions, but it's just something that's not really in most of our control. Learning gaps brought into the school year. This is true every school year. The students show up with learning gaps, but because of the COVID springtime, and then for many school districts an elongated summer, there are larger learning gaps and less identified learning gaps, at least I've noticed, where we have students that are struggling in areas, and it's a little bit harder because of the online environment to know exactly where they're struggling, and the assessment process doesn't look the same. None of that looks the same because students are at home, and so at least for us, for online school. And then beyond that, I also thought about student learning environments. This is something I've been really thinking about for about 2 weeks now. The student learning environment right now, all of our students are online at home, and the learning environment at home is kind of a terrible learning environment for most of our students. There are animals moving around, there's people walking around, there's noise, there's other students learning in the same rooms, like siblings that are also learning at the same table, listening to a teacher barking at them over there. And so it's just kind of a crazy situation, and it's not really, in my opinion, it's not our place to encourage them to go to a different room. We don't know what their house looks like, and it's not our place to encourage them to find a different place. And the learning environment, that's a huge barrier. I was just thinking how with work time, I talked about this in a few of my reflection vlogs in the past. With work time, it's part of the reason it's tough to just say, all right, go work and then come back at the end of class, is because think about all the distractions in front of them. Food, drinks, people, TV, media, cell phones. Like, there's all this stuff going on around them that is vying for their time that they could easily get distracted by. And then presuppositions about school. This is another one. You're not in control of their presuppositions about school. But I do think this is probably a good gap bridger, because you can influence presuppositions about school. We can't influence presuppositions because they are presuppositions, but you can influence the suppositions. You can influence the way that they think about school. And so that's something that kind of brings us into, what are we in control of? What do we have inside of our sphere of influence that we can do? Because I don't want to be super negative, and I want to end this thinking personally about positive things that I can do. But we can, I can have a good attitude. I can choose to have a good attitude, even though this online learning thing is complicated, and many districts have gone to a hybrid model, and so you have students in the classroom and students at home, and it's messy. We can choose to have a good attitude. That is something that we tell students all the time, right? You can't affect the situation you're in, but you can choose a good attitude. The way that you perceive the world has a massive effect on your outcomes in the world. Number 2, my enthusiasm. I can affect how enthusiastic I am about being with the class and my enthusiasm with the content. I had to explain to a student yesterday, I am not gonna complain, or I'm not gonna apologize, rather. I'm not gonna apologize for this content. Don't ever apologize for content. If you apologize for it, what does that communicate to students? That you agree that it's not ideal that they have to learn this thing, or you agree that it's not ideal that they have to take tests? No, don't apologize for that. Celebrate what you're teaching. Celebrate and be enthusiastic about the things that you get to teach every single day. Even if it's something that you might not have chosen firsthand, there is value in everything we teach. If we fight for it, there's value in there. You just have to look hard enough for it. And I'm not gonna apologize for it because I love what I teach. Number 3, you can influence, you're in control of your engagement. And this is kind of a both and, because you're in control of how you create engaging lessons. Hello. but you are also an influencer of how engaged students are. That comes down to management, comes down to lots of different factors, but you are only in control of the lesson you create, right? You can't control how engaged students are, but you can influence how engaged students are. So it's a both-and situation. Creating engaging lessons, taking the time to really think through what would get kids excited about this content, how can I bring in things that kids already love and already know about, prior knowledge, to make this more engaging for them and more successful for them, right? And then hopefully that then creates the opportunity for students to be more engaged. And then finally, you're in control of your management. You're in control of how you manage the classroom, be it online, be it hybrid, be it completely in person. You're in control of that. I'm in control of that. So my encouragement to myself today is to focus on those 4 things. I want to focus on how I'm managing my environment. I want to focus on how I'm creating my engaging lessons. I want to focus on how enthusiastic I am about my content and about the people that are joining my class, the humans that are with me. And finally, I want to control and focus on how I have an attitude during the day, or how my attitude is during the day. Those are my encouragements for myself. I hope that you find them valuable to you as well, and I hope you have a great Monday. Happy teaching.